They say every house has a history. Some have memories, some have scars. But on a quiet suburban street just outside Pittsburgh, one house had something else. Something ancient, something hungry. And for years, it waited in the shadows, watching a family waiting for the moment it could finally crawl out and take what it wanted. This is the true story of the Cranmer family and the demon that lived beneath their home on Brownsville Road. Stay with me, because what you're about to hear is one of the most documented, disturbing, and relentless hauntings in American history. A haunting that didn't just whisper in the night. It waged war. The house didn't look haunted. That's the first thing people always say. A large red brick American foursquare, perched neatly on a corner lot in Brentwood, Pennsylvania. A wraparound porch, wide windows, a peaceful neighborhood where kids rode bikes in the dimming summer light and elderly couples waved as they tended their gardens. It was the kind of house you'd expect to have been the backdrop to birthday parties, backyard cookouts, first days of school. Not a battlefield between good and evil, but to understand what happened to the Cranmers, you need to know something first. The house had a history, one that was soaked in violence, tragedy, and whispered accusations older than the foundation itself. Long before the family moved in, the land had seen blood spilled. Whispers of a murder, the death of a child, rumors of occult practices, and one more detail casually brushed aside, ignored, or forgotten by everyone who lived nearby. Locals said the land itself was cursed. When Bob and Lisa Cranmer first stepped through the door in 1988, they didn't feel fear. They felt chosen. Bob grew up just 2 streets over. As a boy, he'd walk past the house and stare at it, imagining it as his Sumder-like. The house itself was whispering to him. And when it finally went up for sale, decades later, everything fell into place effortlessly. Too effortlessly. The seller accepted Bob's offer immediately, didn't negotiate, didn't counter, almost as if she wanted the house off her hands, or out of her life. But Bob didn't think about that. Not then. The first few weeks were normal. Boxes everywhere, kids running from room to room, the excitement of repainting walls and choosing furniture. And then small things began to happen. Nothing dramatic. Nothing that would send a family running into the night. Just enough to make your skin itch if you thought about it too long. A light leapt off, would be found on. A door would be open in the morning when it had been closed at night. Footsteps in the hallway when everyone was asleep. The family brushed it off. Old houses made noise. Old houses shifted, settled, sighed. But this house, this one, watched. Bob noticed at first. Sometimes, while walking down the hall, he'd suddenly feel as if someone were directly behind him, breathing, close enough that the hair on the back of his neck stood up. When he turned, there was nothing there, nothing visible. Anyway, the activity escalated slowly, deliberately, almost intelligently, as though the house was testing them. Objects disappeared, then reappeared in impossible places. The smell of sulfur drifted through the rooms at random hours. Dark, heavy, suffocating. And then came the shadows. Not the kind cast by lamps or passing cars, but the kind that moved with purpose. Tall, human-shaped, watching from corners. Lisa noticed their daughter seemed troubled, withdrawn, afraid to sleep alone, afraid to walk upstairs without holding someone's hand. And whenever Lisa pressed her, whenever she asked what was wrong, the girl would say the same thing. The dark man is back, soon. All 4 children began reporting the same figure. A tall, dark silhouette that stood in doorways, or next to their beds, or in the hallway outside their rooms just before they fell asleep. But every time the parents checked, every time they flicked on the lights, the figure simply melted into nothingness. For a moment, the house would feel normal again, silent, still, and then, as soon as the lights went out, the darkness breathed. One night, Bob woke to the sound of something heavy striking the wall outside the master bedroom. Thud, thud, thud. He leapt out of bed and yanked open the door, but the hallway was empty. Another thud shook the house, then another. The noise echoed through the walls like something was trying to claw its way out. Bob raced from room to room, but the sound always seemed to move just out of reach. It was as if the house itself was alive, angry, and taunting him. The next morning, they found long scratches gouged into the plaster of the hallway wall, jagged grooves the children couldn't have made. But the worst moment came. A few weeks later, their teenage son woke, screaming in the night. Bob and Lisa burst into his room and found him curled into a ball. Clutching his arm, something had bitten him. Not a small bite, not a confused pet nibble, but a full, human-shaped bite, mark perfect, unmistakable, and deep enough to bruise instantly. Only no one else was in the room. The windows were locked. The door had been closed. What bit him was something they couldn't see, and that was when the family knew something evil had latched onto them. Something that wanted to hurt them. Something that wanted them gone. Desperate for answers, Bob began researching the house's past. At first, the records seemed normal. Previous owners, property transfers, nothing unusual, but the deeper he dug, the darker it became. He learned that decades earlier, a mentally unstable woman had lived there. A woman whispered to have murdered her own child. The death had been officially ruled accidental. But neighbors whispered a different story, that the child had died violently, and that the mother had practiced dark rituals. She claimed the house was haunted, and told friends she heard voices in the walls. Local records and whispered testimonies suggest that a young child was murdered on the property decades before the Cranmers. But the horrifying part, witnesses claimed the child didn't just die. The body was dragged across the floor, leaving a trail that neighbors reported seeing before it was washed away. Some believe the child's blood seeped into the floorboards, right in the corner of the basement where the Cranmers felt the strongest evil presence. People who visited before the Cranmers said that corner felt like something was still there, watching, smiling. Some claimed the murdered child's spirit was not haunting, but trapped, held by something darker. After the death, she left abruptly, refusing to take any belongings with her. And the family who moved in after her, they lasted only a few months. Every previous owner had left the house suddenly, some after violent outbursts, marital collapse, mental breakdowns. As Bob pieced together the timeline, a horrifying pattern emerged. Decade after decade, family after family, tragedy after tragedy, all inside that same brick house, all connected like a chain, pulled deeper and deeper into the cellar of its history. Every haunting has a heart, and in this house, it was the basement. A room the whole family avoided instinctively. Cold even in summer. Still, even when the rest of the house groaned with activity. Sometimes, Lisa said she heard whispers echoing up the basement steps. Sometimes footsteps. sometimes a low growl that vibrated the floorboards, and sometimes, when the door was open, she swore she saw eyes staring up from the dark. One afternoon, Bob ventured down alone, determined to confront whatever was haunting his home. As he reached the bottom step, the temperature dropped instantly. He could see his breath. The lights flickered once, twice, and then went out entirely. Bob froze, and in the absolute blackness of the basement, a voice whispered behind him, "Get out." He bolted up the stairs so fast he nearly fell, slamming the door behind him and locking it. But the whispering didn't stop. It continued, night after night, seeping through the floorboards, creeping into the children's dreams, curling round the family like invisible smoke. Eventually, the Cranmers sought help. Priests visited, blessed the home, sprinkled holy water, lit incense, read prayers. Some refused to come back after the first visit. Others became violently ill after leaving. One priest spent only 10 minutes in the house before stumbling out, pale and shaking, whispering, "There is something very wrong in there. Very wrong." During one of the rituals in the basement, the temperature plunged so suddenly that the priest's breath fogged like smoke. According to the Cranmers, something moved behind the furnace. Not a shadow, not a trick of the light. A shape, crouched, bigger than a man, and then a scream. Not human. Not animal, ripped through the basement so violently that plaster exploded off the walls. During the same ritual, Bob claimed he saw a face, half rotted, half burnt, something smiling through broken teeth. He never described it again. Another attempted a full blessing of the home. During the ritual, objects began flying off shelves. Footsteps pounded through empty rooms. A crucifix snapped in half. The priest later told Bob, "This is not a ghost. This is something demonic." And the demon seemed to hate Bob specifically. It whispered threats, showed him visions of violence, fed on the stress it created in the family, night after night. The house became a battlefield, holy water against shadows, prayers against whispers, light against something that thrived in darkness. But the demon didn't just want the house. It wanted the Cranmers broken, afraid, hopeless. It wanted ownership of them. One of the Cranmer boys awoke to find blood all over his pillow. Not from a nosebleed, not from an injury. The blood was cold, and it wasn't his. Tests came back inconclusive. The blood didn't match any family member. Some speculate it was tied to the murdered child. Others believe the demon was marking him, claiming him. The famous bite mark on one's son wasn't just a bruise. It reportedly began to rot, as if something diseased had bitten through. The edges turned greenish-black. A doctor said it looked like necrotic tissue, which made no sense for a fresh bite. The boy fevered for days, whispering, "It keeps chewing. It keeps chewing." But nothing ever touched him for years. The family fought back, refusing to leave, refusing to surrender their home, their lives, their sanity. Priests performed multiple exorcisms, not just on the house, but on certain rooms, certain objects, and even certain family members who seemed particularly targeted. During one ritual, the house shook violently, picture frames crashing to the ground, walls vibrating, a deep growl echoing through the vents. The demon fought back. It screamed, it clawed, it burned the air with sulfur and shadows. But the priests didn't stop. Bob didn't stop. The family held together, and slowly, over months, then years, The activity weakened. The shadows retreated. The growling stopped. The house grew lighter, as though someone had finally opened a window after decades of suffocation. By 2006, after nearly 2 decades of spiritual warfare, the entity was believed to have finally been expelled. The house stood, silent again, still, peaceful, but the scars remained. Scratches in the walls, stains on the floors, shadows burned into memories, and the Cranmers. They survived, but none of them were ever the same. People ask why the family didn't simply move out, why they stayed, why they fought something they couldn't see. And Bob always answered the same way. If we had left, it would have followed us. The house wasn't the target. We were. Today, the house still stands on Brownsville Road. New paint, new furniture, a new family within its walls. But some say, if you stand on the sidewalk at dusk and look up at the second floor windows, you might see something, a shadow, tall, still, watching, waiting for someone else to walk through the front door and call it home. Because demons don't die. They don't disappear. They only wait.